Deep breath in, exhale. Wow.
Yep, she did it again.
We had another amazing conversation with our dear friend Simran, who I've only met over online. I guess both of us have, right? And the power of her words and presence and her tone and how she speaks it just speaks to your soul, and it's one of those conversations that you just have to experience.
It's like, when you're listening to a song and it just gets you into this state, different emotions and different curiosities and all of that. It's like the whole interview is meditation. Yeah, exactly. It's like you get put into this trance and all these things start to bubble up inside of you, not in an anxiety kind of way, but more of like, this, I have heard this, I know this, my deepest part of me knows this to be true. And it was so good. Yeah,
so good.
And that's all we're gonna say.
Yeah. It's a celebration.
Yeah.
So you just have to show up and listen. Hey everybody. So I think there's been a lot of lessons that we've all learned over the last couple of years, and with all the different challenges and pivoting that people have had to do, we recognize that one of the core things that people need is community and connection. Right?
Yeah. We often talk about like all dis-ease processes, all discomforts, everything comes from a place of disconnect. And these last couple of years, I think that's what's happened for us, is we've felt disjointed and disconnected in so many different ways. And community really is the only way to bring that back within ourselves, so that we can be in reflection with others and with an understanding with others too, and knowing that we're not alone moving through some of these transitions and challenges and all the illusions that we're in right now.
Yeah. And so what we do to really support and create community is that we've got a Health Ignited membership group that we take people through a teaching and an experience and invite them into our fold, and we do this on a monthly basis.
Yeah, it's a container where you get to know one another and you get to understand each other's stories, so that again you can reflect that story back to yourself and understand yourself even more, because really that's what it's all about, is that how do we constantly become more and more curious about ourselves, so that we can step into that remembrance of who we actually are, not who we've been told to be and how we're supposed to behave. But really it's this invitation to be a part of this like club. We're calling it a club. It's a cool club, so that we can support each other. And it's just not Nick and I teaching, it's all of us learning from one another. Yeah.
And so we meet monthly. We've got access to all sorts of different things that are inside our Dr. Jensen website, which are like do-it-yourself courses and protocols and all sorts of like fun, like intellectual but also applicable tools for people to access at their own ease.
Right? So join us. We'd love to have you. And if you are wanting to inquire, you just go to drsjensen.com.
Well, we feel blessed. We get a chance to connect with our dear friend Simran again on this podcast, because she's just recently released another one of her gems into the world.
Right? It's her second book in her trilogy, and we interviewed her just a little while ago about the first one called Living. So if you haven't listened to it yet, please go back and listen to that episode. I sent that episode to many friends, and the response that I always had after was, wow. So it's a must listen. So I'm really excited about our conversation today around Being, which is the second book that she's just released.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here, Simran.
I've been looking forward to being back with you both. I love the collaboration between the two of you and your energy and richness, and most importantly, your authenticity. I think what you're bringing to the world with your true heart and voice is very powerful and a needed example.
Well, it means a lot coming from you, Simran. It's funny because like the feedback that we got on the first episode, people are like, who is this woman? How she's speaking so deeply into my soul when she's speaking. And yeah, you have a gift. And we said this on the first podcast, reading through the words in your book, it was like reading poetry for the soul. It was so profound. And it's so clear. I mean, you mentioned authenticity. I mean, there's so much congruence in your words and how you show up and how you speak. And so I really saw, and this is my own interpretation, so please, I'd love for you to sort of correct me and steer this, but I really saw that first book as like a cultivation within, like that internal relationship and the conflict and the challenge, more of a like what does it mean to be here in this body, having this experience, a very more internal, central, or I-centric sort of experience, where this one sort of feels like, to me, how do I relate to my environment? Like the you mentioned like the duality and some of these other things. How would you sort of, is that a correct or somewhat correct interpretation, or how would you see like this sort of graduation of understanding from the first to the second book?
I think you did a beautiful job expressing what both books are. I think that this is a layering of the individual self. And so as we involute and go deeper inside, what we discover is how that impacts the outside. And so living the 7 blessings of human experience really does look at who we're being on the basis of our identity and our persona, and how we act and react in the world, and why things are happening to us, and how we navigate this experience that we call life. And being goes a bit deeper. It's very much pointing us towards a lot of the ills of the world, and how those very ills of the world exist within us to start with. We are living in a virtual reality, as real as it feels. But when we really get that the change is not in the reflection of the world, the change is here. It's kind of like if you stood in a mirror and you saw something on your face, you wouldn't wipe the mirror, you would wipe your face. And so that's where we need to go. We need to go to the person within. My work has always been devoted to the journey of the soul, and these books are the soul devoted back to you. And so that's what they're intended to do, is help you touch your soul and help your soul touch you.
So tell us about being and the essence of this book, and what you're really hoping all the readers understand from that soul perspective and that bigger perspective of what this book can bring to them.
I think it's probably safe to say that most people feel a little bit saddened by the world, perhaps disgusted, oftentimes find themselves in places of fear or anger about the things that they're seeing, perhaps even feel a bit helpless and hopeless regarding many of the experiences that they witness, or things they hear about, or the possibilities for our future. And what we have to understand is that the world is this reflection of all the aspects of being that exist within us. What we have not known is that there are many levels of being, but they are existing simultaneously. They're expressing simultaneously. They're vibrating all at the same time. So whether we are trying to be positive and say all the right words and the affirmations and all those things that need to be done, there are other levels within us that we are suppressing, ignoring, hiding, running away from, pushing down, that are equally active and present at the same time. And so it's more about bringing present time awareness to all that is presently being. And just as in the last book, I illustrated much of the text as capital self, capital S, lowercase ELF, or all lowercase SELF, or all caps SELF. Being is the same way. There's a lowercase being that is all lower BEING, which really does depict not only our shadow nature, which many people are probably familiar with, but goes more into the animal, the instinctual, the hunter, the huntress that is within us, the part that hungers, the part that feels like it has to take or survive. And that is an active part of the human animal. And there is another part of us that goes deeper, that is monstrous. It is the part of us that would do things that are unconscionable, that would actually imagine certain acts with people that we dislike that we would never tell anyone about, that would wish bad upon someone, but maybe never verbalize it, but wish that they would get their karma. We all have that. That's part of being human. And then there's a demonic side. There's an inner demon side that we all carry. And that's the part we definitely don't want to know. We don't want anyone to know that we have demons or that we might be the devil of the world. But the reason that we have a part of that is because we're seeing those things outside. So for that to outpicture, it has to be in here. And the only way we can achieve true oneness, through true unity and true love, is for us to embrace all these aspects of ourselves. Only then can we find the compassion and love necessary to actually neutralize the things that are happening outside.
It's amazing. I mean, you said so many things I want you to talk deeper about. I know personally, I've always been the positive guy, and I've always wanted to be the one that, like, throws rainbows around so that, everyone can be uplifted. And I've recognized, sure, it's a gift, but it's also like, it's a division of, like, not owning everything else that exists within. And I think in a world where we're constantly looking for safety, it just feels so scary to even consider going into those places, or referencing that we have our own demons, or, burying them so deep within ourselves, in our subconscious mind, even in our bodies, and unaware that it's actually part of dis-ease expression. That's a place to traverse that is so important. And you talked a lot about that actually in the first episode, just telling some of your story and some of the depths of, like, the challenge you had to move into. Presenting these ideas is so important, and helping people understand them. So the doorway in, what does that look like for people to start to, like, open their eyes to the ownership? Because if we're truly going to live in ownership of the fact that we're creating our external world, and part of the manifestation is actually, either paying attention to these inner demons or this inner darkness or not, like, that's part of what needs to heal. But it's so easy to push that on, oh, that's someone else's. So long sort of question, but, like, there's a doorway in. What does that look like for people in different situations?
You said a key word, and that key word was safety. And we cannot feel safe in the world or create safety for others until we find that safety within. And so just as a small child might be afraid of going into a dark room, we tell them, if you're going to go into the room, turn the light on, and then you'll be able to see in the dark. And so we're basically doing the same thing. We're going inside this dark room. We only know what we know. Are we willing to be curious enough to discover what we don't know? And this is really more about being curious, being adventurous, being open to say, what if there is something in me? What is it that might be there? Rather than saying, oh, there's got to be this part of me, or there's a monster in me, or there's going to be these inner demons that I have to face, and it's going to be excruciating. It doesn't have to be that way. This can be a love affair. And in fact, these 3 books, they are that love affair of coming back to self. They are the return to understanding what true love is. Whatever a person believes in, whether they want to call it God or something else, the truth is you cannot love God unless you love every single person and experience that exists, because it is that. And so what we are saying is, can you get to the place where you love every aspect of yourself? You're saying that you're always the positive one, the one that, wants everything to have the rainbow on top of it. But what does the rainbow come from? It comes from the storm. It comes from the rain. It comes from all those things that are the combustion and the friction and the constriction that have to create that energy to create the beauty. And the very same thing exists with the different levels within us when we are willing to face them and what they have faced in terms of combustion and constriction and the pain that they have held. Then we start to see the rainbow that shines from those various aspects of us. And in order to do that, we first have to embark on the illusions that we've bought into, because those levels of being only exist because we suppressed the truth of who we are, and we bought into these illusions that life, that family, that culture, that conditioning had us believe. And we started conforming and living by those standards, believing that that was the truth, when in fact it is not. And so as I move into these 7 illusions, you do have to stay in that elevated big picture viewpoint, because these are not things that the small mind can look at and understand. They're not things that the identity will necessarily go, oh yeah, that's an illusion. It's going to have to require that overarching view of, could this possibly be an illusion? And where did I buy into it? And how does this and every other illusion that is talked about here really run my life and make every choice for me, instead of me going down into my gut and my soul and making those conscious choices?
I know you want to jump in. There's something so important about what you said, and I'd love for you to like just clarify for me to help understand this as well. I feel like when we're seeing, or we're being invited to see the illusion, the darkness, the challenge in life, it's hard to, I think for most people, to not still be stuck in that small me identity, right? So what I'm hearing you saying is you actually have to invite in like this, multi-sensory part of yourself. I mean, that's the way that, what's his name?
Gary Zukov.
Yeah. Say it a little louder.
Gary Zukov.
That Gary Zukov talks about, like we have this 5-sensory being, and then there's a super sensory, multi-sensory being. What I'm hearing is the invite is, do we first have to step into seeing that this physical body is not necessarily who we are in its totality, that we have to actually accept that there's maybe something larger than what we're relating to start to be able to see things. And that's maybe where we can feel safety. Because so many people just don't feel safe in their body to even go like, it's too scary to even look at that stuff. So well, and maybe you can articulate that.
This is a process of embodiment. So there are 2 things happening here. And that's why these books were written as 3 books, because they are the different aspects of self. One thing we're doing is we're embodying more deeply the aspects of ourselves that we've never known. Mm-hmm. And so this book is completely about our self-absorption, our self-obsession. It is completely about the little me that needs everything. It is in your face about how self-absorbed you are. It's in your face about how self-absorbed our creator must have been in order to see itself in 8 billion beings. Talk about self-obsession and self-absorption. That is it to the divine nth degree. So we have to be as narcissistic as the one that created us, right? That has to be elements of us. And for us to deny those elements would be to deny the divine that created us. Now, many people might get triggered by what I just said, and that's okay, because only when we are willing to see the divine and oneness as all things can we start to understand that we are that big, that we have the capacity to be all things as well. And so from that little teeny tiny place, simultaneously, we can have that overarching view at the same time. And this illustrates how we became separate, because you are going to literally be embodying, separating into the small me and separating into the larger me, while witnessing it from the human you. And you're going to see these 3 parts. And by the time the 3rd book comes around, those 3 parts merge together. So there's a very definitive process that takes place as you move through these texts. And it illustrates in a very sensory way the way that you separate and come together, the way that you embody and the way that you're out of body, the way that you look through the lens of these eyes and only see from this form, and the way that you can move from these eyes and I'm able to see from what it looks like from Sonya's eyes, or what it looks like from a tree, or what it looks like from the amethyst that's behind me. I can look at this room through the eyes of that amethyst. Only when we are willing to realize that we are everything, we can expand to the greatness of all that is. But to do that, you have to be self-absorbed first. You have to go back and take in everything that you have diminished and called separate.
Love that.
Yeah. And, we're sold a story from a very young age. And we see the illusions, and we're told that the illusions are truth. And that's the dream that we have to move towards. And so my question to you would be, like, I have an opinion of like where that starts. Like, I feel like it starts the moment the soul decides to come in after conception, that there's that initial separation. And now all of a sudden it has to go into this physical form. And then the physical form comes out, and we're developing the ego, we're developing the identity, we're looking at the world and from all these different lenses. But when my witnessing of my children, when they've come out, like there's this like wonder, there's curiosity, they're stepping into their demonism whenever they can, and they're not apologizing for it. And, they're just being. And then over time, when they've been sold a story, that changes, like something shifts in their eyes. And so what have we done as humans, whether that's in like how we're communicating with each other or behaving, that's shifted that? Because I feel like we're born with that, and then it's lost. And so how can we change that?
Yeah, that's why in living, there are 7 blessings. And the very first blessing is actually the blessing of life. Mm-hmm. And that is where it starts. And so with each correlating blessing, there's a correlating illusion. And then in the 3rd book, there will be a correlating grace. So the correlating illusion to the blessing of life is the blessing of time. Mm-hmm. And so when babies are born, they are timeless. They have no sense of time, of past, of future. They only know presence. And we see that. And that's what creates wonder within us. We're awed by it. We want to capture it. We want to bottle it. But what we start to do is go, oh, the child is now 1 month old. And now the child is 6 months old. And now by the first birthday, they've walked. And they said their word by this day. We start to incorporate time into their life. And so they start to live by time. We celebrate their first birthday, and they go, oh, first birthday. They may not be conceptual at that point, but they know that it's a marker of something. And then it's the 2nd and the 3rd, and then it goes into matriculating into school. And so slowly rather than being this vertical alignment of the divine that is all expansive, that is so tuned in, that is so present in that chord, that field, all of a sudden that ray turns horizontal. And no longer we are in timelessness. Now we are in the horizontal spectrum of time. And that's the first place we become misaligned, because we're no longer vertically connected. We are now on this horizontal line where at moments we are connected. And we are connected only if the people around us step into a moment of timelessness. But as long as they're caught up in time, we will be caught up in time. So that's how the illusions begin. And that's how the complexity of life begins, which is the first antithesis of the grace in book 3. Complexity is what starts to build around us. It builds in our minds as thoughts and beliefs. It builds in our minds as goals and agendas. We have to meet certain things by a certain age. We have to do certain things by a certain time. We have to hurry up because we'll be late for school. All of these things create not only this complexity that is going on around us, but it creates this complexity inside of us. We become burdened by this web of things that are no longer the simplicity of just being present. And that's how it begins. We become the creator of our own veils and our own matrix.
That's powerful. I mean, you mentioned the virtual reality before, and that really like encapsulates so much for me. And I often sit and wonder, like, where am I blind? Where am I blind in my body, or my body, but my mind or my energy? Like, what am I not seeing? And just what you just described there of this illusion of time and going from a vertical orientation and connection to horizontal one where we sort of access it from time to time. I can't help but feel like, this is part of this like virtual reality structure that we're in. And so many of us buy into it. But it's also a stepping point to to recognize that, well, that's part of like this the darkness or the duality that I'm not witnessing right now. And it's on autopilot. I'd love for you to speak a little bit more to this scenario that we're in as a virtual reality, and like where we can become more conscious of it. Because just having a conversation like this, I recognize how much I'm like keeping my kids on a specific schedule through the day, myself. Like, how do I organize all these things? Like, what was my like weekly schedule look like? And everything's organized around time. And I know that's one of the illusions in this book too. But I'd love for you to speak to like just this virtual reality that we're in, because like time is a huge one.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about life as a virtual reality, it usually takes me to my own child who's 12, and he loves video games. And I'm sure yours love them as
They're
much.
doing it right now.
As we speak.
As we speak. They always are.
Yeah.
And as they play those games, oftentimes it is about finding the loophole out of something. You know, if they're going through a game and they're running from the zombies or whatever it is, it's about finding the way out, you know, or finding the path to skip and not fall through. There are all these little things inside video games that are so aligned to what we do as life, but we're not taught that. We kind of stay in the homogenized, conditioned experience. So we believe that we're trapped in this virtual reality within the 7 constructs of illusion that have been placed here. And until the light bulb goes off to say, what if there is no time? What if I really am timeless? What if I didn't follow the schedule that I typically follow? And maybe I started with something simple, like I have a project that I keep thinking about and it needs to be done. What if I just didn't do it until the timeless moment I was sparked to do it, rather than I got to get this done. I got to go work on this. I've got to set some time aside for this. What if I just let my spirit and timelessness guide me to the present moment where it just flowed out? And I stuck to what I feel like doing in this moment. Most people would probably go into fear of, well, I wouldn't go to work and I wouldn't make money and how would I know that I'm going to eat, or how would I take care of my kids? What would I do if I didn't have a schedule? But see, that's how we imprison ourselves. Mm-hmm. We've put ourselves in our own cage and we keep ourselves running on that wheel because we don't think we can get off the wheel of time. And yet what I have learned in the last decade is the more I step back, the more still I am, the more I magically see things take place, the more I'm taken care of, the more I'm in line with creativity when creativity is meant to flow. There's less effort, there's more divine ease. And so, you know, they always say, do you want to work hard or do you want to work smart? And what I'd like to say is, do you want to work hard or do you want to live in a state of divine ease? Because those are your 2 choices. Mm-hmm. And one choice is going to keep you the hamster on the wheel and keep you in time and keep you in your virtual reality. And the other one is going to start deconditioning you. And it's going to start pulling out all of those places that were put on you that are not the truth. And it will bring up every fear. It will bring up every belief that you have. It will bring up every push down emotion that was placed in your body from 0 to 7 so that it can dissolve. And all we have to do is be with it. There's nothing to do with any of that. Can you just give it the space and the timelessness to feel it so that it can dissolve and be absorbed. And that brings a whole new meaning to self-absorption. So now instead of being self-absorbed externally, trying to do all these things to get somewhere because our minds and our egos have told us we have something to reach, now we are absorbing everything and dissolving it back from when it came. We're putting it back into the divine void that it actually came from. And that void is us. We were the creator of that. And so when we start to dissolve the virtual reality that we created, we begin to step into true reality, which most people would say is not real. And so it's an interesting paradox, because what we see in life appears real. But if you look at what the mystics and the ancients and all the spiritual texts, they will tell you that this is all a dream, and what's truly real has nothing to do with the dream. But that requires your exploration and your curiosity. It requires your experimentation to discover that it's the truth.
I love that. I mean, I can't help but think like time equates to productivity, like whether it be production in years or like accomplishments. Like by this date, I will have accomplished this. I will have completed this. And the invite really is this. I love that divine ease to really step into timelessness. And then there's a part of my physical, like intellectual mind that goes, but I have to make time to make things happen. And so I like it. It's an opportunity really for me just in this moment to just recognize and bring that to my attention, of course. But I love the idea of absorbing and dissolving, because it comes from that the creativity within, and maybe most essentially just to move us towards our mastery of it, so that we can recognize that this perpetual lesson or this experience is there really in service of us. However, most of us would label that as a glitch in the virtual reality game that we're in.
And like an everyday example, I think, can be for listeners. It's like, when we're doing something that gives us joy, or that we feel that spark inside of us, and we're like fully present in that moment, time doesn't ever exist. Like all of a sudden it gets stretched out. Or if, for us, when we're traveling and we're just being, and we're just with our family, and just taking like every moment in, and everything from our environment in that full presence, time doesn't exist anymore. All of a sudden everything gets stretched out and twisted and all the things, and it doesn't matter. It's in our desire to meet what the illusion has told us we need to meet that we get fixated on the time. Because now there's pressure, right? There's like that inner like desire, and like everything we hear now from motivational speakers, or everything's about drive and motivation and purpose and all those things.
Grit,
so and grit and resilience and all these things, and I think that's what locks us into that space of time. Because then, like you said, we have our 5-year plan, or we have our 10-year plan, and it can feel I think it can create some uneasiness in people that are more left brain and scheduled, and that gives them that feeling of groundedness in their life and control because of their past experience and things that they've been through. So how can somebody that's moving through their everyday with their busyness, right? How can they take space or create space to bring into just awareness that this is happening? I know Nick asked a question kind of like that, but maybe I'm asking for more tangible somethings that people can bring into their life so that they have that experience.
Yeah, both you and Nick alluded to one of the other illusions, and all of these build on each other. There's no order to them. There's no hierarchy to them. They just all exist, but they are interwoven like a web. And one of those is the illusion of identity. And so when you talk about the goals or the 5-year plan, or I need to attain this or achieve this, what you're really doing is building out an identity. You've created a figure in your virtual reality, and you have a destination that you want it to reach. But what you don't realize is that identity, and every thought, word, and action of that identity is responding to its inner wounding. Everything you're creating has come from a place of wounding. And so it can only perpetuate the same type of experience over and over again. If you look at the majority of people in the world, they've chosen a career based on a wounding of the past. Every action, every step, it's from that. And so that's how the illusion just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, there's nothing wrong with identity and goals and all of those things. What you have to determine is, are you here for your ego, or are you here for your soul? Because those are two entirely different paths. Your ego will send you down a scenic route. It will have you encounter all kinds of things. You can reach all types of destinations. You can even go as high as the stars and become a star. And it will have its own set of complexities, own set of blessings, those alternate blessings I talk about in book 1. You will find all of those repeating over and over and over again because you followed the path of ego. If you're following the path of soul only has one destination: to return to itself, the fullness of its expansiveness. And that means to slowly dissolve all ego. And that sometimes can be a challenge for people because you'll go through this place of, but if I'm not that, who am I? And when you make that commitment to start dissolving ego and truly align with your divine presence, life will support you in pulling away the things that keep you in the place of ego. Your fighting of that is the suffering that takes place. And so identity is that illusion that keeps the time construct going. And if you're wanting to slow down, then you have to look at, why is it that I want what I want? And most of the time, our identity is simply because we're trying to feel significant. We're trying to feel as if we mattered, that we came here and our existence meant something. And that is the purpose for identity. But what if it means nothing? What if none of it means anything? What if there would be greater meaning in you just having a great time? If you living the life of your dreams, if you putting your time and your energy in the things your body wants to put energy into, rather than forcing your will all the time and feeling the heaviness and the tiredness that keeps coming on the body. Most people feel so tired all the time because they keep pushing their body and their spirit towards things they really don't want to do. But they've decided that it's because this is my identity, I have to do this now. Because I've built this business, I have to carry it on now. So they, again, lock themselves in even more cages. And rather than attaining this freedom that they're looking for, they don't realize they're sending themselves in the opposite place of freedom. And it all comes from simplicity. We have to start separating away all of these things that we've bought into. The other one that you happened to slightly mention, Sonya, was when you talked about a lot of these marketers talking about, killing it or going to the, fighting for what you want and all of that. And that's the illusion of war. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is part of us, sitting in there and trying to take what we think is ours, trying to dominate. And that's the other illusion that really causes great destruction. It's why we see so much fighting in the world, because we don't realize how we're fighting against one another and fighting against the spirit. How we have come to believe that if we don't go out and get what we want, we'll never have it. And that's one of the greatest illusions of all. We look all the time in nature and it's provided for. Mm-hmm. We can look at a baby, it's provided for. But we have to trust, we have to relax, we have to open back up into our yin. And that's something that both men and women have lost sight of, but particularly women have gotten completely away from what it means to be receptive, what it means to be their true feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the art of receiving and not really being modeled that through our environment. And when we are in a more patriarchal world and we have these things we have to live up to, it's easier to be in the yang. It's easier to be in that state. And that is that state that, especially for women, just speaking from my own experience, is the state that creates frustration because we know we need to step into the yin. And yet we hold ourselves over here because we find that it feels like when we're stuck there isn't a way to go there. Because if we do, we lose something instead of looking at it as if we're going to gain so much by just being. It's like using that example of nature, that it doesn't have to do anything. It's just being. And how do we discern between that? I'm just thinking of an example just on the weekend. So last year I applied to do a TED Talk and almost made it and got the feedback, please try again. It was between you and somebody else. And make sure that you put your application in again. And then the woman that was part of that committee asked, I'm like, well, what was some feedback? And she's like, the thing that was just missing is you need to be a little bit more aggressive. Like, you are the person that needs to talk about this. And my instinct right away was like, but that's not how I want to operate. And so I was having this challenge of discerning. I'm like, okay, was my humility out of not believing in myself, or am I really starting to step out of this illusion that I have to fight for my position in life? And so how do we discern between all those beliefs that show up in those kinds of moments?
See how the world keeps us going in that direction?
Yeah.
They tell us that we have to be a certain way, we have to be aggressive, we have to push, we have to go out and get what we want. And it's really interesting, with coaching individual clients, there always tends to be a certain theme that comes up for every client at the same time. So it's always fascinating to me. And as of late, it's been about the fight to get what I want, or the fight with my husband, or the fight with my children, or the fight to get more business. And so that's what a lot of the clients have talked about in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and we've been working with. And what I like to tell people is, if you're fighting in one area of your life, you're fighting in all areas of your life. You may not realize it. It's going to be more subtle, but there's a part of you that does not feel like you deserve it. So you've got to go get it. And who you encountered was one of those people. It was one of those people that believe you've got to be aggressive. It's one of those energies where we want everyone on stage to go out there and push their energy on people. And that push is what activates that hunger in other people. So we're operating at a very shadow level, a very animal hunger, kill or be killed kind of level. What I came to realize was, that's not who I am. I'm not going to go out and market the way people market. I'm not going to go out and build a business because I don't have a desire to do that. I know that those who need to come to me, they will find their way to me. And that is a deep trust that I'm taken care of. Now, the mind at times will often go into, oh, but you need to do this because this is how everyone does it. And it's for you to just be with that part of yourself and find out, where is that discomfort? What's the belief I bought into that thinks I really have to do it that way? And am I standing so strong in my sovereignty, in my knowingness, that my message or my work or my ability to express my creativity will reach who it's designed to reach, whether that's one person or a million people? The fact was that it reached me. It touched me. It expanded me. Because ultimately, you're the only one here. Everything else is part of the virtual reality, here to have you decide whether you're going to go down the left road or the right road. And it's always up to you. And so intrinsically, Sonya, when you think about what that felt like in your body when she said you needed to be more aggressive, did it feel like you were not confident, or did it feel like that was not you?
Yeah, no, it felt like it wasn't me.
Yeah. So you were more true to your authentic nature. And in being more true, what is meant for you will come to you. I think one of the things that we have gotten used to, men and women, is we feel like we have to go out and find what is for us rather than letting it come. Mm-hmm. And that letting it come can sometimes look like a direct invitation to do something. And other times that letting it come can just be your response to something that you've seen that's just inspired. So your yin has been sitting there, and then something has come, and there's now this creative force of being inspired. And then the yang inspired action wants to take root. And so, are you designed to do a TED Talk? I think probably so. I think it probably wasn't on the topic that you're putting out there. I think there's something deeper, something richer. There is something deeply profound for you to discover that wants to be voiced. And in that moment, it will come through in your soft-spoken, rich way, but it will feel the way those people need it to feel for them, but activate them in a completely different way. And so you have to trust the timelessness of it.
Yeah, I keep hearing trust. And I think that's a big theme for all of us to anchor into. Yeah.
I keep going back to what you said before, that question of who am I? Yeah, what a powerful question that is to ask ourselves more regularly. Especially like, I guess, when a conflict comes up, or we like one of the illusions, like you read about in your book, the time, the duality, the war, like the conflict. What a great question to ask, because usually, like you mentioned, we're usually asserting or answering that question with, well, I'm the doctor, I'm the mom, the dad, the whatever, and so
roles.
That role takes this action to this particular completion. But when we ask the question, well, who am I? Like, I just feel like that's sort of like a wonderful doorway into the beingness of the experience.
Because all of those things are masks,
Right.
the doctor, the father, the mother, the business person, the writer, the author, the speaker. Those are all masks. Not one single piece of those is true. It's like Halloween every single day. What's behind the mask? Can you give it shape? Can you give it form? And really, if you took all the masks off, you can't. There is formlessness, there's spaciousness, there's openness. And one of the illusions I have in the book is the illusion of evolution, which is something that we've all bought into. We've bought into this idea that if we do enough spiritual growth work, we'll get somewhere, we'll reach enlightenment. Or if I take enough courses, I'll be the best at something. All of this idea of evolving into something. But the truth is, you are the divine presence walking. There's nothing to evolve to. There's only the presence to be with it. And when you're so present with it that you establish that knowing, then all of the masks have to come down. And I'm not saying that you're not here to be human, because the third book is all about humanity. It is about being willing to know the power of the great that is within the small. And then, instead of letting your ego run your life, you use the ego. Right now, most people's ego is using them. We are here to use the ego for greater good. But we can't know how to do that unless we first lasso that ego and understand what it's doing to us and to our lives.
Yeah, I've been reflecting on this a lot. Like, I find it interesting the spiritual consciousness, or like the spiritual growth sort of like movement that's happening, and knowing thyself and whatnot. That there's this idea of like, we came here to grow, to evolve, or like to like reach certain levels of enlightenment. Like that to me feels like part of this whole virtual reality. Like, why would we do that? Like, if we are divine consciousness having, this human experience, what do we have to grow towards? Like, it's already who we are. And it's what an easy trap to get into. I'm a light worker. I'm here to like bring light and wake people up and all this stuff. It's like, well, people are already who they are, or I am who I am. And if it's just me having my own internal experience, and what I tap into, or what I reveal or absorb or dissolve within myself, is just, remembering, or like being in connection with this divine nature of who we are. What are we growing towards? Like, I love that that's part of like this book, because it's a question that's been on my heart for a while. Just, what are we buying into,
Or like, where is the disconnect? Oh, no, go ahead.
I'm sure that you have both been awed at times by things that have come out of your children's mouths.
Oh, yeah. Like, I thought you meant like odd, like ODD. Like, yeah, that too.
But I know that, I witnessed little children, or even 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds. They'll say things that are just completely profound, and they'll see things with such purity that us grownups can't even see. And that in itself shows that we have this in us. There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. That we really are here to just allow ourselves the experience of what it means to be human. Every feeling, every experience, every opportunity, every tragedy, Like to get to a place of such neutrality around every single thing that happens in our lives and not have to push it away. You were talking about the timelessness of joy earlier, Sonya, and how we get to that place and there's such timelessness. But can you also be in the timelessness of mourning when someone passes? Can you just drink that in and feel it and hold it and nuance it and make love to it and allow it to swallow you until the next moment that takes you to something else? We are nothing more than the wind and the rain and the sun and the stars. We're just here hanging out. And we've made a complete illusion about what all that has to mean and what has to be done. And so we're now on the return. And that's why the world looks the way it looks. That's why things are crumbling. That's why there seems to be chaos. It's to get us all to go back to this place of shedding all the things that are not really true about us.
Yeah, you answered the question I was going to ask. I feel like it's in that feeling of detachment that there's this longing to look for the light worker or look for that guidance or look for someone to tell us that there's a reason for the suffering. There's a reason for this. But I think that is starting to dissolve. And in the dissolving, in this transition, there's, like you were saying, chaos, because the human mind can't fully grasp it because we still have the illusions right here. But the soul is starting to, I think, speak up, or the whispers, we're all hearing them a little bit more, that it's just about the remembrance, that the connection's already here. We're not disconnected. It's here already.
I'd experienced it as a kid. And I reflect on this often. I don't know how old I was. It must have been like 6 or 7, maybe 8 years old. But I don't know if I was in a dream or having some sort of connection or communication with something. But I was in this void, this blackness. And there was a voice speaking to me, but I couldn't access my family. It was sort of asking the question, well, who am I if I'm not Nick, like my 7, 8-year-old self? And I remember trying to articulate that to my parents. Like I was in such a state of like fear, yet awe, and yet like no one's going to remember who I am. Like it's not death, but it's something else. And it was so profound that I reflect on it often as like interpreting this experience of like, you know, that you said something like the, I can't remember, is the eternal void or like the nothingness into the everythingness or what have you. But it was kind of an experience of nothingness. And it, you know, I was in a state to not really be able to interpret it, but I can't help but feel like they're in this sort of journey or this experience of like really losing attachment to who we are. That identity is part of like us awakening to everything that we are. And so maybe an early childhood experience of like just, you know, appreciating the fact that that so much of who we think we are is just entrapped in our physical identity and experience. And when we invite, or when we spend time in this timelessness, that was sort of an experience that I had as a kid that allowed me to see there's more going on here that I'm not yet knowing. But it makes me think of some of this stuff that you're sharing right now.
You experienced your eternity. And what happened was you removed your focus from behind your 2 eyes, and you went to the larger eye that could see everything, that could see nothing, that knew that none of this was real. And that's part of the reason within the books that I write it as I do with the 3, with the eyes, the eye and the eye, all written out different ways. Because until we start to realize that there is something different than what we have come to believe, there's no possibility for the mind to even open to that thought. Your parents couldn't fathom that. No. You brought them something that was beyond their constructs and their conditioning. And so it was going to sound like science fiction or, you know, gobbledygook to them, because they couldn't even fathom where you were. But where you were was real. It was true.
Yeah, and it's hard to even articulate it now, because it's like it's not something that words can really express. And even trying to articulate to my parents at the time too was, you know, it really just came out as fear, really. what happens when we die.
What might help you go back to that, or help any of your viewers even experience that, is sit in a room that you're very familiar with. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and center into your heart. And then just imagine you are different things in the room, and that you're looking at the room from those different places. Imagine that your family is in the room. Imagine that instead of looking behind your eyes, that Sonia's in a chair across from you, and you're able to see the room from her eyes. And you'll start to realize that your consciousness has this ability to shift, and has this ability to transport itself to different places. That's not different than when people remote view. All they're doing is moving their lens to a different place. There's many depictions of the divine being a column that is just covered with eyes looking from all different directions. We are those eyes. But in order to do so, we made up the story of identity. We locked into a space and time. We decided we needed to have an experience, so we created duality. We needed to have a means of give and take, so we devised money. We decided that there had to be higher and lower, so we created hierarchy. And within that identity, because we were somewhere in that higher and lower, we created evolution. And to get there, we had to have war. And yet all this time, we were just a divine child playing dress up, making up a story, just like our own children do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, such like great teachers, right? If we really observe the children and see how they witness the world, because they can do it from so many different angles. You were talking about, when kids say things and it makes you like pause often. My oldest one day, you being from the same tradition, he was confused about Lordy, like what's happening here? There's a celebration, and often, the way it's practiced here, it's just for boys when the boys are born. And he could see that I had emotion behind my description around the whole thing. And then this is like weeks later, all of a sudden, one day he's like, what if it's just because it's a celebration of, because in one village, everybody had the same last name and that's their identity. And they wanted their identity to keep going because the women, they change their identity when they get married and they leave the village. So what if it's just that? And he just had no emotion around it, nothing. And I'm like, okay, yes.
Yes, thank you.
What brilliant. See?
Yeah, I'm like, yes, we just get so caught up in all the illusions and carry these stories. And yet they're just able to like, what if it's just this? Yeah.
Yeah. What an interesting way to see the world, right? Like we often just assume everybody sees and interprets the world the way that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get these little, personal experiences that feel more real than the world that, that you're in, or you hear stuff like that, read your books and you awaken to these deeper insights. You start to go, well, that's real too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, what are we choosing to label as real?
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if like people listening are feeling this with this episode. It's like, I almost feel like I'm in a trance when I talk to you.
Always.
Always. Because I think it takes you to this other, this space of the vastness, instead of here's a protocol, here's what you should do, here are 5 steps to looking younger, beautiful, right. It's this like, there's this story. And I think artists, musicians have this way of expressing these deeper things, poetry, writing, so that we can, I don't even want to use the word understand, but access and digest and all what we need, what we actually need, mm-hmm. not what we've been told what we need. So thank you for bringing that to us.
That's very, very sweet. I would like to tell people to do more nothing.
Yeah.
But that is really the greatest practice you could have, is do more nothing. Be mm-hmm. with more of everything that occurs in your life, and don't act. Just be with it, feel it, embody it, let it consume you. And in that, you will have your own discovery. My books are guides, but in each book I tell people, go through this, but have your own experiment. See it for yourself, because it's tangible. It's something that you can hold, but you have to be willing to savor it with every part of your being to let it really reach inside of you and show you something.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So on this path that you're on, in writing, one could look on the outside and go like, Simran, you're just trying to teach the masses, like, you're sharing your stories to awaken people. Like, how do you articulate what is that you do? Because like, I don't even know how to put into words, really. Like when talking to you, it's like here's an invite, but like, how would you articulate what is it you're doing on the planet?
I'm definitely not trying to teach anybody anything. I would say to anyone, don't go to any teacher or any workshop or any practitioner or anybody to get something. There's nothing they can give you. Go to them because you want an experience of yourself. Go to them because you want to see what can come and rise from within you that will inspire you about you. The reason that I wrote the books is because I wanted to experience myself reliving everything that I had come to understand. And I could see it in a way that I never saw it put anywhere else. And so I wanted to put that down. And the reason to talk about it, I delight myself. I actually really enjoy hearing what comes out of my own mouth. But isn't that what children do? Mm-hmm. They love to stand in front of a mirror and they love to look. And that's what we're here to be. Can we just do things out of the sheer delight of our own being and not really have any need for it to do anything, to impact anyone, to sell a certain quantity, to even have them be noticed, but simply because it's delightful for me to be here. It's thrilling for me to connect with the two of you. I get a chance of communion and heart expansion, being with others, and I'm present. I get to be present. And that's really all the reason that we're here in life, is to delight ourselves and find ways to be fully present.
Yeah, it's like a celebration. Like you're celebrating yourself and not be, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but like, I don't hear that you're celebrating because you want the accolades or like, like the typical things. You read a book, it's like a business card. It's a way to like get your message out to the world. It's like, this is my stamp. This is who I am. So everybody knows me as this. It's really, you're just celebrating the power of words, celebrating your own articulation of them, also celebrating like the new insights and like discoveries that the people have, but also yourself, and you're referencing like the insights that other people are having, a reflection of you. And so like everything really becomes this beautiful celebration. When I think of like a birthday party as a kid, like there is so my younger son did it. When do I get to have my next birthday party? Because his younger friend got so many presents. So at some point, like the celebration is about like the reward of the presents. But really, like if we actually, thought back to our kid self, it was like, wow, there's all these people that are sharing so much love in this container called a birthday, and we're celebrating it. I feel so special. I feel so loved. Like what a beautiful experience.
Yeah. Life is about celebration. That's it. You have put it purely in the exact word that it needs to be. And if every single moment is lived in that celebration of self and celebration of being alive, then there's really nothing else to do.
For those of you watching, Nick and I are now crying.
Yeah. She did it again.
She did it again. Yes. Yeah. And I think what a beautiful way to close this conversation too. It's like, it's just in celebration and a celebration of each other and this gift. And like you said in your first book, it was the gift of life. And I think if we're just in every moment in awe of that, in curiosity of that, imagine the joy we could all feel together on this planet. I just think it would shift the world. So thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you for the time and the presence and just the chance to be in conversation together.
Thank Thank you.
Thank you, Simran.